he said, well, I'll tell you what, just take this with you. And he threw me like an 8 ball.
Ladies and gentlemen,
You are now about to witness
The journey that is the Lyfe Choyces podcast. Can you take us back to the time before recovery for you? Like, what did your life look like?
Well, I can tell you the book is about childhood trauma, alcoholism, drug addiction, crime, prison, recovery, and God. To sum it up, but the childhood trauma part. My father was, an Irish gangster, and he died when I was 10, and he was in prison most of those years. My mom was a product of foster care. And so I really didn't have a shot.
There was a lot going against you right off the bat.
It was a lot going against me. Yeah. And so I was a pretty wild kid, on my own most of the time. I was a little thief because, I had a rough beginning.
Let's put in a
Yeah.
little bit of perspective.
Yeah.
When you were, let's say, around 10 years old,
Yeah.
this is going back to what year?
1967.
And in New York City,
Correct,
was
the
it?
Bronx,
So
yeah.
this is a rough time
It's a
in New
rough
York
time.
City.
Yeah.
You're from an Irish background, so I would assume you grew up in the what we call like Jewish ghetto, Irish ghetto.
Right.
Right. So
Correct.
there's a lot of criminal activity as a means to life.
Correct.
So you were more or less forced into that.
When my father was away, my mom at one point, she worked as a waitress across the street in a restaurant, but she had, I guess my father's friends got her hooked up, and they put a payphone in our kitchen in the apartment. And from 2 p.m. till 6, 7 at night, she would take calls, and then somebody would come by and pick up all those numbers, after 7. And so, we lived quite well during that time, which was less than a year. But eventually the cops showed up and ripped the phone off the wall. And so I saw a lot of things the little kid shouldn't have seen, probably, I'll tell you, a couple of things happened. 2 things happened over COVID when we were locked down. One, I went through the steps of the Adult Children of Alcoholics, ACOA, 7 other people on Zoom, just for the hay of it. I absolutely know I qualify for that program. And going through those 12 steps of that program, I really got to look. Well, people would ask me about my story, and I would say I had a rough childhood. I saw things a little kid shouldn't have seen. Or, my mother did the best she could. Now, after going through that program, I go, my mother did the best she could, but she could have done a lot better. I took a real look at my childhood, and I'll tell you, it was rough. I was sexually assaulted as a kid, 8 years old, by some guy she brought home. She beat the hell out of me. We had nothing really.
Isn't it interesting how when someone goes through those things, we make excuses for the person who did it or was part of it? And like you just said, until you took this other 12-step program during your sobriety,
correct,
only about 5-ish years ago in COVID, did you realize she also could have done better?
At one point, I looked down at the paper after writing about 5-6 pages, and I went, oh my God, like, who would do that to a kid? And no wonder I went through all that. And the crazy thing is, you love her no matter what. No matter what. She's your mother. And in sobriety, I have learned to forgive her. Hey, I want her to forgive me. I grew up to be a bad guy for a while there as a result of alcohol and drugs. I did make my peace with her, in life, and I ended up making her very proud. But going back to that, at 12, I tried to commit suicide as a result of that.
Young.
I noticed when I wrote out my childhood and in the book also, writing the book, I noticed when my behavior changed. after the sexual assault.
Like drastically.
Yes, drastically. All of a sudden, I started cutting out of school. I started smoking cigarettes. I was a little thief before that. And what did I steal? I stole a hat. I stole gloves in John's bargain store. I would like hang out with other families, and then just slide out with them with the stuff. So yeah, it was a rough way to go.
That was almost the catalyst to kind of put you forward in a much quicker motion down a bad slope. As a child, I think we all do silly things.
Right.
As a youngster, I stole some things too, some candy from the corner store, a comic book, even though I had money in my pocket. But when something so severely strange, severely wrong happens to you at a young age as an infant, you're still, everything is still growing. Your brain, everything.
Correct.
To have to go through something as severe as a sexual assault from someone who is supposed to be safe.
Right.
A boyfriend of a mom. That's coming into your house. That's supposed to be a safe area for you. And then that unfortunate situation changes the way in which you became a criminal.
Correct. That incident, she had told me he was coming back the next week to visit, and I stood on the staircase of my building with a steak knife, 8 years old.
Wow.
And I had a plan. As he passed me going up the stairs, I was going to stab him, in the back. And he passed me, and I raised the knife, and I couldn't do it. And I ran, and I walked the streets for hours beating myself up, for not being able to do it.
You're better off that you didn't.
Well,
in some ways.
Yes.
In some ways.
Yeah. Well, I came home that night because I had a younger sister, 5 years old, and I was deathly afraid for her. And so I went back. A couple hours later, I came home. And, he was gone. I don't know if he saw the knife. I think he might have. But he was gone. And about a year later, I asked my mother about him because I was going to get him. And my mother said that someone had murdered him. She goes, oh, yeah, no, someone murdered. And right away I thought, some kid's father.
Yeah, someone found out of something that he
Yes,
did.
and they got him.
And took retribution on him, for sure.
Yeah. So, that whole, the childhood thing. Then, of course, I was introduced to alcohol.
At a young age.
Yeah. But even before that, I have to say that, did I become an alcoholic because I had a bad childhood and I was sexual? I don't know. And all I know is, I could have just been a budding alcoholic addict who happened to have a bad childhood and got sexually assaulted. The bottom line is, it doesn't really matter. The cucumber has become a pickle, and there's no going back. So
that's a very interesting way to look at it. Absolutely. Yeah. Instead of blaming certain things that had happened, you just don't know. If this didn't happen, would that not have still happened?
Yeah.
It's very interesting.
Because I'm not going to say my mother was an alcoholic, but she definitely drank a lot. And so that gene is probably present somewhere. And, but I will tell you, as soon as I started drinking, I thought, you know what? I found the oxygen I need to survive on this planet.
And you were how old?
13.
13 years old. Yeah. And not just drinking occasionally by sneaking a beer out of the parents' fridge. This was drinking.
I just want to go back to the suicide attempt. I slit both my wrists, and, my mother just happened to walk in my room, and she seen me, and she took me to a doctor around the corner. And he stitched me up, and he said to me, I remember, he goes, why did you do that? And I said, I'm tired of feeling bad all the time. That was it. I'm tired of feeling bad. So when I found alcohol, for those few hours, I did not feel bad, And I came home that first night because we got the older guys we chipped in, we got 3 of us, we got the older guys to buy us a couple of pints of wine, and we drank them, had the best time. We smoked cigarettes, we laughed, we talked about things we never talk about. We all went home. I got sick. I threw up purple all over the floor. I never even got undressed. I just plopped on the bed. And I couldn't wait to do it again. My mother came in and she yelled, and, that's it. There was no big deal because she's very familiar with the drinking game. Kids would be talking about going to the Yankee game, going camping, doing this. At me, I was focused. I knew how much money I had saved for the weekend, who I was chipping in with, who was going to buy it for us. Like, that was my focus.
At a
At
young
13,
teenage year.
Yeah, at that age, I remember clearly.
Not interested
no.
in sports or having fun on
No.
the street. It
No.
was just, let's
Right.
go get the alcohol.
Exactly. And then, of course, and you know, as a youngster and a teenager, I was a hustler. I mean, I would think of ways to make money. You know, kids played Spalding. We used to play stickball in the Bronx and all over New York. Stickball bat and Spaldings, these round balls. And they'd always get lost down the sewer, you know, because there's a sewer on every corner. I'd come out, 6 in the morning with my paper bag, and I had made these hangers so that I could fish those balls out of the sewer. And, by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'd have a bag full of Spaldings, and I'd wash them up. And they were sold 15 cents a piece in the store. I'd sold them for 5 cents a piece. I had contracts with the supers on my block. Once a week, the garbage trucks came through, and they emptied them and left them on the street. I brought them in for each building. I got a quarter a piece from each building. But, here's a kid, 7, 8 years old, and I'm making up all these jobs to make money.
You were an entrepreneur at a young age, but you
I was.
weren't doing the entrepreneurship for the sake of building more businesses to become successful. You
No.
were doing it to earn money to fix the addiction.
Well, I will just say, I had not, money was probably my first addiction.
Okay.
I remember that because I haven't started drinking until I'm 12, 13 years old. But from 7 to 13, I'm doing all these jobs. And I also became a shoe shine boy. I found a shoe shine box, and bringing the garbages in and out. And I learned how to shine shoes, and I had a string of bars. On Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, those were my bars in the neighborhood, And that was from 10 years old, on. And every dime I brought home, half went to my mother, always. The other half went in a jar in my T-shirt drawer. So I was always looking to make a buck. Hence, when I first started smoking weed, I mean, the first time, we chipped in for a nickel, and I said to the guy, "What's the next thing over this?" And he goes, "An ounce." And I go, "How much is that?" He's like, $35. I go, "How many nickels can I?"
Yeah.
Right away. I mean,
Trying
right
to
out of the
figure it
gate.
out.
And, by 15, 16, I'm dealing weed. So now I've gone from, I'm drinking and I'm smoking weed.
And selling weed.
And selling
You're
weed.
basically
Yes.
asking to get caught and to get punished in ways that most teenagers should not.
Well, what happened at 16, I came home one day, and I'm still living with my mother and my younger sister. And now my mother's going, because now I'm giving her like $100 a week, and she's going, "Where is this money coming from?" I come home one day, and my little sister goes, and I go, "What?" I walk in my room, and my bed looked like the cover of High Times magazine. And there's a .32 caliber, laying on the bed with an extra clip.
Under the age of 17.
Yes. My mother walks in the room and goes, she walks in behind me and she goes, "So this is what you do. You're a drug dealer." And I go, "Ma, it's just pot." And she goes, "Everybody smokes pot." She goes, "I don't smoke pot." She goes, "I'll help you with anything. I want this out of my house today." And I got it out. I got a furnished room, and that was my dealing room. They had furnished rooms in the Bronx in private houses. So that was the beginning of my...
Sorry, so how old are you at this time?
I'm 16.
You're 16 years
Yep.
old. You're hustling because you're doing
Yeah.
multiple jobs to cover
Right.
the fact that you also have a job as a drug dealer.
Right.
And at this time, you're making enough money that you also then go and rent yourself
Yeah.
a furnished room so that the drugs don't have to be in your mom's
Correct.
house, so she thinks you're not dealing, but really all you're
Right.
doing is just moved it over here instead. And you're a full-on drug dealer, separate house or separate room
Correct.
while doing all these jobs,
Right.
and you've not yet gone to jail for anything.
No. Once, I will tell you that once I started dealing weed and was becoming successful with that, I dropped the jobs and the shoe shining. I stopped doing that. I had about a great year and a half, 2 years. I mean, at that time, I hadn't been busted. At 17, I got a Harley Davidson. Yeah. Well, a friend of mine had an accident. He bought one. He didn't want it. After a few months, I bought it from him, cash. I had no license, no registration. It was crazy for about 2 years. It was, but I had a 20-year run from 15 to 35. So those were the great years then.
And during this entire time, your drinking has amped up, obviously, because you have this extra cash. You're not really you're responsible for you. You're not really worrying about what anyone else says about you. So you're just having a great time all the time.
Right. And then things started to happen. And then I started dealing speed, crystal meth. A guy would come and buy weed from me from the schoolyard I hung out in. And this big guy, he dressed like a waiter, like black pants, white button-down shirt, black shoes, and he had this little dog, and I'd sell him a nickel here or there. And he invited me over one day. He said he wanted to talk to me, and I'm thinking, this guy's this weirdo or what? So, but he said it was about making a lot of money, and so I went over. It piqued my interest, and he said, have you ever thought about selling speed? Have you ever done speed? And I go, oh no. This was my thing. Oh, this is not that kind of neighborhood. I go, we just drink, we smoke some weed. That's about maybe trip or something, do a few pills, but we don't. That stuff is not around here. And so he said to me, well, I've been watching your operation from my window, and I looked out right. He goes, you have a guy dealing on that corner. You keep your stash in the sewer right next to the steps there, so you don't have much on you. And he goes, boy, from 5 p.m. till 9 p.m, this place is nonstop. So he goes,
he knew,
yeah. And he said, well, I'll tell you what, just take this with you. And he threw me like an 8-ball. He goes, hey, just take it with you, check it out. No charge. He goes, here's my number in case you want to talk. And let me tell you, that night by 11 o'clock, I sold it.
Gone.
Yeah, it was gone. And of course, I called him the next day. And that was the beginning of my downfall.
That's the catalyst right there.
Right.
That's where you hadn't gotten in trouble yet, besides your mom knowing.
Right.
And now, because you're dealing harder stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. So now, and he said to me, I was getting announced at a time off. He said to me, look, don't mess with this stuff. He goes, I'm a dope fiend, and I do about a bundle a day. He goes, but there's no end to this stuff. And he goes, and now you be very careful what your clientele is going to change. And he wasn't kidding.
Mm-hmm.
It changed, nonstop, coming, day and night. Now I got to watch my back all the time. I'm carrying the gun all the time. I'm 17 years old. I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, I ended up getting stopped in a car. I was in the car with a few of my friends, and I had the gun on me. I slipped it in the back seat of the car. The cops, I had a clip in my side pocket. I had farmer jeans. And so they knew there was a gun, and they took us in, and they found it. And they said, everyone's going to Rikers Island unless somebody comes forward. And I went, that's mine. And so, they ended up bailing me out.
But this was an unregistered weapon, obviously.
Oh, yeah. Unregistered.
And you're underage, right,
Yes.
to carry.
Right.
And so now you're going to Rikers.
Yeah. By this time, I'm 18 now.
Okay.
And I'm going to Rikers.
And how many days were you in before they bailed you out?
I got out the next day.
Okay.
Yeah, they came and got me.
Okay.
Yeah. There was one friend of ours who has a lot of money, and I said, call him and tell him I'll see him when I get out to get me out of here. And they got me out.
Yeah, because they knew that you had money somewhere that you would,
exactly.
no problem, you
Right.
could pay them back.
Right. Yep. So it never really got better after that. Once I started getting arrested, I started getting arrested on a regular basis,
In the same community, by the
yes,
same patrol?
Yes, and so my mother, in the interim, when I just had got the furnished room, a few months later, she married. She married a guy that she had been seeing, and they moved out to Brooklyn. When things started to get bad for me, she had said to me, if you want to come out, you can come out. And I was like, listen, I'm already got one foot out the door. You go, and I'm good.
I'll be fine.
I'll be fine. And so when things got really bad, I went out there. And I think I was like 18. And I did the worst thing I ever did in my life. I lived with her for a few months. The guy, we never got along. He didn't, he wanted to marry my mom. Me and my sister were really not part of the deal. So, and it's not by what he said, it's what he never said. But, so I was very uncomfortable there, and I had no friends in Brooklyn, so I'd take the train back and forth. I took a change jar from him. He had a change jar as, about this high plastic, all quarters and dimes. And I took that and I said, I'm leaving. And I started dealing again. I started my whole operation up again. He did have me arrested, but they let me out. He dropped the charges. And I will tell you, that simple act, I could not go back to that house for 20 years, for one thing. It killed me. I mean, the minute, because you can paint that picture any way you want. I robbed my family.
Mm-hmm.
Here I am. I'm this tough guy, and I had a reputation as a kid, as a bit of a nut job, because, if you had a fight, the kid went and got his older brother. I went home and got the bat.
Yeah.
And I got brought home by the police with the bat a couple of times. Like, they'd say to my mother, "This guy's nuts, man." So I had taken that jar. It killed me. It absolutely killed me. And the only way I could stop feeling that bad was to drink and get high. So from I would say from 15 to 35, I was in and out of institutions,
How many times do you think you had been arrested in that period of time?
I think 10 times.
10 times?
Yeah.
Mostly from 17 to 35.
Yes, correct.
Right, because that's when it actually happened.
That's right.
So even a shorter period of time, 10 times in and out. What was the longest amount of time you spent in jail?
5 years.
5 years
Yeah.
in
Yes.
Rikers?
No, that's a jail. You do up to a year in a county jail for misdemeanors. But I had felonies.
Right.
I had armed robbery. And so I got sentenced to 12 years. And I did 5 out of the 12.
How do you manage? I've never been in jail, knock on wood.
Yep.
How do you manage with an alcohol addiction and possibly a drug addiction?
Yeah.
I don't want to sound naive. I know stuff gets into a jail, but for someone who has an addiction, that's an everyday occurrence that you're wanting to drink and wanting to smoke or do whatever drugs you may have gotten into at that time. Was it at that time back then, was it really that simple that it was just in the jail enough that you were?
In the jail, Rikers Island, if you have money, you can have whatever you want. Whatever you want. Now, when you go to prison, state prison, it's a whole different ballgame. And the further upstate you go away from the city, the harder it is to get drugs.
Okay.
So if you're in Sing Sing, which is very close to the city, drugs are pretty prevalent there. But not like Rikers Island. I mean, I was nodding out in my cell. I mean, people would send money orders for you to put in your commissary, and then you could buy dope with the money order. I mean, right in the cell.
And I'm sure it's still like that in 2025. The system is very strange on how it's run.
But it's so the further away you get, and I will tell you, I was strung out on heroin when I got the 5 years. When I got
before you went in.
Before I went in, I went in. I was strung out, and I was sick for about a week, maybe more.
Cell or infirmary?
Cell. Yes. Yeah. I always said, Rikers Island has the best detox I've ever been in.
Literally have no choice.
It's not very accommodating, but it's effective,
Yeah.
I got off of it. And the further away you are from the drug, the less you want to do it. It's still there. It's still the first thing in your head to do, but it's not, it subsides. It just subsides the longer you're away. And I talk to people now who are trying to recover, and they're saying, "Oh, they want me to go to a sober living," from the rehab, and I go. The longer you are around other people who have a common goal, the better chance you have. When you do get out, the more armed you are to fight against this disease.
Strength is in numbers.
Exactly, yeah. So And my last time I was in prison, I did 5 years. I got out. And it's funny, it's in the book also. By the way, the book is unscarred, and I'm going to give you a copy of that
Absolutely.
before I leave.
I will put the link in the description down below for anyone that wants to purchase a copy as well.
Yeah, it's
Perfect.
it's a page turner. You know, it grabs you.
I mean,
So
you
I'm
got my
told.
attention right now, and I'm
Yeah.
sure we're just scratching the surface of what's in that book.
Exactly. I can go into detail, you know, in the book.
This is a great spot to put a pause on it. I'm gonna have you back next week, no problem. We're gonna find out what happened that the sober you ends up going back down the addiction road for another 10 years, and what those 10 years were like when we come back next week.
Very good.
All right. Thank you so much for joining
You're
us. Your
welcome.
story. I mean, I'm so excited for next week. This is like, I'm like almost speechless the whole episode because I'm just like waiting to hear what happens.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thanks, Bradley.
For my community out there, thank you so much for coming back each and every week. We'll see you next Tuesday at 2 p.m. here on the Lyfe Choyces podcast. Much love, everybody.
You are now about
The Journey, Lyfe Choyces podcast.